Hello and welcome to a week 9 edition of the rest of season Top 150 show. My name is Adam Levitan. As always, joined by Mark Dankenbring. And this week, filling in for Mike Leone is Jack Miller to talk buy lows, sell highs, trading in season long, rest of season rankings, etc., etc. Mark, good morning.
Morning, Adam. Yesterday, a nice little break from NBA, so I was able to focus all the way in on NFL, which was nice. And I want to give a shout out to Jack. He's been crushing it on our NFL projections team, really been helping out a ton. So thanks a lot, Jack. Excited to talk to you both about some NFL here today.
Yeah, what these NBA guys go through on a daily basis is absolutely insane. It's like what we do for an NFL slate, except it's every single day. Absolutely crazy. If you haven't checked out NBA DFS and NBA props packages, be sure to check that out on the subscribe page. Jack, how's it going today?
It's going good. Yeah, I cannot believe what the NBA team has to do every day. But on the NFL side, we're halfway through the season, regular season at least. So happy to talk about what we can expect over the second half of the year.
Every week we do these rest of season top 150 rankings. I think it's been a really good addition, and we don't just pull these ranks out of our ass and show up with them. We put a ton of work into this. We think it's useful for trades. We think it's useful for ads and stuff like that. Try to think about what's going on with injuries, when guys are coming back, who's had their bye, who hasn't, who has good playoff schedules. It's all baked in there. I want to start with the Joe Mixon stuff. I've heard varying things here, Mark, on the Joe Mixon takes. Some people say, listen, man, this was always coming from Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon had outrageous usage. He was on pace to catch 70 balls. He gets a ton of work inside the red zone. Of course, it's coming. You'd be crazy to sell Joe Mixon now. I think Evan said yesterday when I talked to him on the show that he'd be holding Joe Mixon if he had him. There's another camp that says this was a home game against the Panthers. It was Joe Mixon's perfect spot. He ran like God, and he has a very difficult playoff schedule. If you had Joe Mixon here, Mark, what are you doing with him?
I'm definitely in the camp of holding Mixon at this point. You know, we had been talking for weeks and pretty much months about how good his role has been and that more touchdowns were coming. And, you know, we were kind of expecting the explosion. Obviously, 5 touchdowns in one half is a massive explosion. But, you know, I think the role is so strong here moving forward. Like, he's game script independent. We hit on that when we were talking about him versus Chubb earlier this season. You know, he catches passes. He has a 15% target share on the season, which is, I think, 7th among running backs right now in the NFL. He's gotten every single running back carry inside the 5 and 10 yard line for the Bengals. So, you know, the role is just so strong here for Mixon. I think the Bengals, obviously it was the nut matchup, you know, at home against Carolina, coming off a brutal loss against the Browns on that Monday night game. But, you know, I think the Bengals offense will continue to be solid moving forward. They'll end up getting Jamar Chase back. You know, we've talked a little bit about Mixon might have a tough playoff schedule, but you know, you never know if like someone gets tackled at the 2, they're going to give it to Mixon. He can score a touchdown. So, you know, I think he's game script independent. I'd want to hold him. Think he's a clear RB1 the rest of the way.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, I talked a lot on the solo pod about this whole usage versus talent stuff. And I do think Joe Mixon has much more talent than people give him credit for. I wouldn't be worried about that. I do have maybe a little bit more concerns than Mark about the playoffs here at Tampa, which actually could be okay if like Tom Brady is just giving up. We can talk about that more in a second here, although they did get the win in week 9 at Patriots. Has been a very difficult matchup for running backs. And then versus Bills is obviously a difficult matchup as well, though that's one that could be feature a very high total and very high scoring game. So, you know, it's okay. But yeah, I don't think I'd be selling off Mixon. I think given what I'd likely get and what my teams look like, I'd probably be a hold on Mixon. The other big story of the week, Jack, was Justin Fields. And I mean, it went from so fast. Like, I suggested lightly in our Slack that maybe it's not that crazy 2 weeks ago that we should be playing Justin Fields over Malik Willis. And I was roasted. I mean, I was laughed out of the room. And now we have Justin Fields at the QB9. Now everybody and their mother has full 3.9 inches for Justin Fields. Now, I get it, man. It doesn't take a lot when you can run like he can run. It does not take a lot of progression as a passer to make you a top 10 fantasy quarterback. I don't want to overreact too far here on Fields, though. Jack, what do you think about him rest of season. And if you had him, I guess a good question is, a lot of people probably have Fields and another quarterback on their team, right? Like, what can you actually get for Justin Fields in the trade market?
I don't know exactly what you'd be able to get on the trade market. I do think, I mean, we talked last week saying he's a fringe QB1. I think it's fair to say at this point that like he's a QB1. He has 11.4 carries over his past 4 games. Obviously, he had 15 carries, which was a season high last week, but he has at least 7 in each game. And then there was a quote from, I think, Matt Eberflus about how a couple weeks ago the Bears coaches got together and like watched Deshaun Watson film from when he was in Houston and kind of used that to get Fields more involved as a runner, and we've seen that kind of work out beautifully over the past few weeks. And now with the addition of Chase Claypool, they might start to throw the ball more. We saw Claypool in a pretty limited role, even though they made an effort to get him the ball early. I think once he's fully up to speed, he's gonna challenge Mooney for like wide receiver 1 duties there. So if they have 2 competent NFL receivers, and then Fields is running 10 plus times a game, which he's been doing over the past month, I mean, it's hard not to be a top 12, top 10 fantasy quarterback when you've got that combination. So I think at this point, I mean, now would be like a great time to sell Fields simply because he's coming off the most rushing yards in a regular season game of any quarterback ever. But like, I'm not, going out of my way and saying now you have to sell high on Justin Fields because the workload he's getting right now is so valuable.
I mean, they play the Lions at home this week, the Bears. And so if you wanted to sell Fields, he's probably going to put up another 20 ball plus against the Lions this week. I'm sure we'll have a very good projection on that when our projections come out later tonight. So, I think if you want to sell Fields, holding him for one more week makes sense. If you need something right now, though, I mean, if I had one of these guys in this range, in other words, if I had Dak, Burrow, Tua, Herbert, someone like that also in addition to Fields, and I could get a running back or a wide receiver for Fields, I think I would probably just do it and ride with one of these other guys. It's going to be hard for Fields to have much higher value than he has now, although, again, he does have the Lions coming up and then the Falcons in a dome after that. But then it gets a little bit tougher at Jets versus Packers versus Eagles versus Bills. I will note that Justin Fields does play at Detroit, the alleged Coors Field before this past week, the alleged Coors Field of DFS football in week 17. Mentioned Deshaun Watson in there, Mark. I talked to Evan about this yesterday about Deshaun Watson coming back. We have him here at QB 14. Again, he's not quite back yet. We still have, I think, 3 weeks left to go. He can play week 13, can Deshaun Watson. I think overall, when people are thinking about Cleveland stuff, they've had this in their mind, right? Like, we're not sneaking this past anyone. Everybody knows Deshaun Watson's coming back. Everybody knows that's an upgrade for Amari Cooper, for Nick Chubb, really for the entire offense. It's easy to forget on the field how outrageous Deshaun Watson has been in his career, one of the best fantasy quarterbacks. How much can we bake in his return to all these Browns rankings? And would you be trying to go get guys like Amari? Even DPJ, I think, is an interesting guy to target if someone just has him sitting on their bench and doesn't really have any need for him.
Yeah, I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is probably the most attainable, Browns asset at this point. His target share has been, really solid this whole season. I think he's around 18%, which is, kind of like wide receiver 3 range for fantasy. And I mean, I expect Deshaun to play pretty well in this system when he comes back. They have a strong offensive line, strong weapons there with Cooper and Njoku should be back by the time Deshaun is starting. And then, DPJ is solid and obviously that run game to anchor their offense as well. So, we've slightly been ticking up these guys as the weeks go on, just hoping, kind of putting them more on the fantasy radar. I think they're all, decent buys at this point. Kareem Hunt, maybe we get some more action in the passing game, just more, volume there for him could be better. But in general, I think the Browns are, kind of the arrows pointing up. They're past their bye at this point. Solid offensive line, as I mentioned, and the defense hasn't been performing well, so they're going to have to put up some points. So, I think things are looking good for the Browns fantasy-wise.
Yeah, not to belabor this point on Fields, but I think Davis Williamson here in the chat brings up a good point. Everyone says Fields is sell high. Nobody ever wants to trade for quarterbacks in one quarterback league. You're right. Like, in one quarterback leagues, quarterbacks just don't hold that much value unless someone thinks that Fields is in the Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes type tier, which I don't think that he is. I don't think we don't think that he is, but I've seen people out there being like, I'd rather have Fields than Hurts for the rest of the season. It's like, okay, I'll take Hurts then, and you can have Fields. So yeah, but I totally understand what people are saying about one quarterback leagues and trade market there. Let's go to the Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris stuff. I'm sure you guys have been tracking all this stuff on Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. Rumors out there that they could go as soon as this week to a relatively even or even a Jaylen Warren ahead split. That would surprise me. I think my guess for now is it still remains kind of 60-40, 65-35 in favor of Najee. I don't think Jaylen Warren should be on anybody's waiver wire at all at this point. We do have him up to 119th overall. I don't think you can get anything for Najee Harris at this point, Jack, and I'm not trying to be trading for Jaylen Warren. He's probably already on a team, so I'm not even sure there's a move to make here on Jaylen Warren. I just wanted to note that it's really getting tight between these two guys, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there was a tweet about how Tomlin could bench Najee. Florio had that Jaylen Warren's expected to see more touches moving forward, but it does seem like, everyone's kind of reacted to that. And then even if Warren does start to see more touches, there's still the question of like, how much is a touch worth, like for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because Najee's probably not going to go away completely. So you're still dealing with a guy in a timeshare on a bad offense. There have been times this year when Warren has gotten the long down and distance stuff, which would make him a little bit interesting if he can start to be more involved as a receiver. But I agree with you. I think in general that like no one's going to buy Najee Harris right now, so you can't trade him. And then Warren should be rostered everywhere, but not someone I'd like go aggressively try to get.
We have to talk about Kenneth Walker, aka Gale Sayers. Like, what would you give up to get Kenneth Walker at this point? I mean, we have him all the way up here to 13th overall. Dude cannot be tackled. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, he's like Nick Chubb or Derrick Henry, where like people just like fall off of Kenneth Walker. Obviously, Seattle has been very, very run heavy around the goal line. Seattle has been relatively run heavy or close to neutral in general. I hate to go down the talent path though and just be like, this guy can't be tackled. That seems outrageous. I don't know though, Mark. I mean, I don't know. Are people looking to sell Kenneth Walker? We're certainly not here. We have him RB5 rest of the season.
I don't think people are looking to sell. No, I think if people have him, they're just so overjoyed by what he's been producing that, I think he's mostly a hold, but I do think he deserves to be, top half of the RB1 section. We have him at RB5 right now, which I think is pretty fair. I was definitely worried that Travis Homer would end up cutting into his pass game role once he became healthy, but that didn't really happen. Walker still ran, I believe, like 60% of routes this past week with Homer back. So, that's really solid. He saw his second double-digit target share in the last 4 games. So he's also being, worked in a little bit into the passing game. And then, he's just, completely commanding all of the running back touches. He has 88 carries since Rashad Penny went down. DJ Dallas and Homer have combined for 12. So he's gotten 88% of those running back carries, which is just absolutely elite among running backs, kind of like the Derrick Henry, Dameon Pierce range. So, Josh Jacobs as well in that range. So I think Kenneth Walker is, kind of the league winner that Leone mentioned he could be at this point. The only downside to him is a couple tough matchups in the playoffs. They do play against the 49ers first week of the fantasy playoffs at Kansas City, which is, proven to be a good matchup for running backs, and then against the Jets, who again have a great defensive line and have been relatively stingy against running backs as well. But Kenneth Walker, just an absolute smash in fantasy right now.
All right. I think a lot of people are probably holding Bills players, Jack, and they're like, what do I do with Bills players while Josh Allen is in limbo? Josh Allen's backup is Case Keenum. Everybody knows Case Keenum, long time journeyman, bit undersized, obviously massive downgrade from Josh Allen. My take on the Josh Allen injury right now is that it's not a long-term one, that when they say he's day-to-day, I believe them. That doesn't mean that he won't miss a week, 2 weeks, something like that. I don't think the way I would play it now is that at most he'll miss 2 to 3 weeks. And in a best case scenario, he plays this week. And under those conditions, if people are panicking, I think buying Gabe Davis is fine. I think buying Steph Diggs is fine because it's not like they'll totally fail with Case Keenum. I don't know, Jack. Any further thoughts on the Bills stuff? How would you handle going after guys like Diggs and Davis, perhaps?
Yeah, I don't think it sounds like a long-term injury for Allen. And then in the short term, like if Allen were to miss this next game or two, I mean, you're starting Diggs regardless. Gabe Davis, I would be a little more concerned about without Josh Allen. He only
Oh
has
yeah.
one game this year above a 16.7% target share. Like he's so dependent on just this being an explosive, high volume passing offense. They're second in pass rate over expectation right now. I think if Keenum plays instead of Josh Allen, they might be a little more balanced because they don't have, a top two quarterback passing the ball anymore. So in the short term, I think Gabe Davis may be more of like a bench guy if Keenum has to start a game or two, but like for the rest of the season, you know, if you're like a playoff team or something, and you can afford to bench Gabe Davis for a couple weeks, I do think now would be like a reasonable time to go get him.
I want to bring up the James Conner stuff because I felt like this Cardinals run game has been broken for a while. And I know James Conner had a really good role. I do think they like him much better than Eno Benjamin or any of these other guys. But man, the run game and the offense just feels so broken to me. I've been avoiding Arizona running backs for a while here. Obviously, James Conner shoved it down my throat with all those touchdowns last year, but I really have major concerns about efficiency and even touchdown opportunities on this team. I think Herzig likes Connor a bit more than I do. We settled in here at 55th overall, the RB 18 on James Conner. I don't know. Like it's a tough spot if you have James Conner because he didn't really do much in the box score last week, even though the usage was good. So I don't know if anybody's buying him, but I don't know if I'd be out trying to buy James Conner either, though, even though I feel like we're ahead of market here with our ranking. Mark, what do you think about the Connor stuff?
I would lean a little bit more buy and hold than sell. I think he's kind of like an RB2 by default right now, just because of how, what we've seen at the position with all the timeshares and injuries and everything. His role was pretty solid this first week back. He played 70% of the snaps, ran, a route on 67% of Kyler dropbacks. They cut out Keontae Ingram from the mix. So it was pretty much just a two-man backfield there with Connor and Eno Benjamin. I think Connor is like an okay player. Again, I think he's a mid-range RB2. So if you can, sell him for more than that, you can sell him. If you can buy him for cheaper than that, I think it's a decent buy just based on usage. You mentioned kind of the lack of goal line role this season. We saw a couple years ago with Kenyon Drake there get all those goal line touches and touchdowns, and last year with Connor. And this year it's kind of disappeared. So I'm not sure if that's just kind of like a small sample, first half of the season thing. Like we'll see that flip back and Connor does score some touchdowns. But, I think mid-range RB2 is the right valuation for him. You're on mute, Adam.
Buck stuff. I mean, offense comes back and wins the game, but it was all like this one K-dot and catch on the last drive. Otherwise, everybody's talking about, is Tom Brady retiring? Is he done? Is he going to make up something like his elbow hurts and just give up in the middle of the season? They come back and win the game in miraculous fashion over the Rams, and now everybody's kind of excited again. I think the offense remains broken. Like, how do they turn this around given the state of their offensive line? I will say this about Buck stuff. They play Bengals, Cardinals, and Panthers during the fantasy playoffs. The Fournette stuff is scary. He was pissed off because Rachaad White got a crucial series in the second half ahead of him. CBS's Tracy Wolfson caught him all pissed off about that on the sideline, did a report on it. I think it's going to keep getting somewhat tighter between Rachaad White and Leonard Fournette. And I just don't see how Brady can get back to that vertical aggression that he had before when he doesn't trust. Evan made the point, like, when you don't trust your offensive line to protect you, the game plan reflects that. And right now the game plan is like 3-yard passes to Chris Godwin over the middle. So I don't have a lot of optimism here, which pains me to say because this offense has been so fantasy friendly ever since Tom Brady got here. But I can see it just on volume with Mike Evans and Godwin. What do you think about all this stuff, Jack? Would you be trying to buy Bucks guys right now?
Yeah, I'd be open to buying, I think, Godwin and Evans just because they're getting so much volume. Evans' target share is higher than it's been at least last year. And then Godwin is still getting solid volume, even though the efficiency that he's kind of always had hasn't been there as much with the offense being so bad. I agree with what you said about the running backs. Like Fournette, it just seems like he's trending in the wrong direction. And then Rachaad White, the offense is just so bad that I'm not sure you can really even buy him, even as he's kind of ascending workload wise. And he hasn't been super efficient either. So Evans and Godwin, I think I'd be like open to buying, but I'm not necessarily going out of my way to get them just because of the state of the offense right now.
Yeah. Let's talk some playoff stashes here, Mark. We're not sure on Marquise Brown's status, but I think if and when he comes back, and I think he's pretty likely to be back for the fantasy playoffs. Obviously, I think he will be pretty valuable. We also have Eli Mitchell coming back from injury. We have Jameson Williams maybe coming back from injury. And then I'd also throw Treylon Burks into the mix. The Titans face Chargers, Texans, and Cowboys in the fantasy playoffs. What do you think about some of these guys as stashes?
I tried to dig a little bit on Marquise Brown to see when he's coming back. I couldn't find too much other than he posted on Instagram he'll be back real soon. So, take that for what it's worth. I will note the initial timeline was like 4 to 6 weeks on him. And I think we're coming up on week number 4. So I would expect him back in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So if he was dropped, I think he's a good pickup. We've been going through a lot of bye weeks. So maybe people did drop him in order to start someone else. Eli Mitchell, I think obviously with CMC there, he's pretty much a handcuff, we're expecting him back this week just based on 49ers beat reports. And we kind of have him for, like 6 rushing attempts and a target. So that's not really anything startable at this point, but I certainly think a worthwhile stash in case CMC does go down. And then Jameson Williams, I don't know. He's, it sounds like he won't be back until December at the earliest. And at that point, it's like, how quickly can he even be integrated into the offense? So he's a stash and really deep stuff, but I don't even know, when he's back, like in his first game, are we going to feel confident starting him? I'd say no. So he's probably kind of lowest on the list here for me, but I think Marquise Brown is definitely top of the list if he's available.
Yeah, for sure. If Marquise Brown is available, I would assume people use their IR spot on someone like Marquise Brown. That's what I would have done, but if he's available, for sure. There was a bunch of Odell Beckham news this week. Jake Glazer reports that Odell Beckham is been cleared and is ready to go. That does not mean he's ready to play in games, right? Like I still think the earliest or the likeliest time that Odell Beckham actually plays in games is probably December. It's November 9th right now. He still has to sign. He still has to work out. Obviously, he's coming off of a very serious knee injury. We don't currently have Odell in our top 150 here. There's a lot that's been tied to him to the Cowboys. It's an interesting add to a team because, he's going to come back on a brand new team with a brand new playbook off an ACL injury, and you're only going to have him for basically the fantasy playoffs, and it's a wide receiver position where hopefully we're pretty deep there. I kind of get it though. He's a huge name, obviously, and people are excited about stuff like this. When it comes down to like Jameson Williams or Odell Beckham, I think it's close. I probably prefer Odell, but I don't know, man. It wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world to say Jameson there. Jack, what do you think about Odell's outlook? Would you be trying to have him stashed on your team?
I don't think I'd add him yet. Like you said, December is probably the most realistic timeline. I think going into week 10 is probably a bit early, but I do think it makes sense to have him on your radar. And I think him versus Jameson Williams, I would rather have Odell.
Yeah. What do you think there, Mark? I think we have Jameson Williams there, 150th in the top 150. What do you think about Odell versus Jameson as stash?
Yeah, I'd probably lean Odell despite the rankings right now, just because it sounds like he's either going to the Cowboys, Bills, or Rams, which I'll think are kind of superior spots to Jameson Williams on the Lions.
Okay. Some people are probably holding the Mostert bag right now, the Raheem Mostert bag, and they're like, oh, no. Oh, no. Jeff Wilson is with the team for 3 days, and he's already playing ahead of my guy, Raheem Mostert. I mean, it certainly does not look good for Mostert right now. I don't know what you could possibly get for him if you wanted to dump him, though. We do have Jeff Wilson 8 spots ahead of Raheem Mostert in the rankings. And God, I mean, he was able to play and play well so quickly on this new team. How can you think that it doesn't kind of get a bit even wider there? I don't know, though. Raheem Mostert has played fine this year, and they've been winning with him. What would you do if you had Mostert right now, Mark?
I think you probably have to hold unless, people see the box score this last week where he scored a touchdown and, still view him as more valuable than Jeff Wilson. I certainly side with Jeff Wilson in this debate. I don't think it's going to get much wider than maybe like 60-40 in favor of Wilson. I think this will stay pretty much a true committee because, Wilson, it's not like he's been a massive workload back his entire career as well. He's relatively vulnerable to injury. So I think McDaniel is going to, continue to mix and match there. And we're going to project about 50-50, maybe 55-45 in favor of Wilson moving forward. So, I think both are kind of like in the low end RB2 and flex range moving forward, just with how strong the Dolphins have been offensively. I think we can expect, touchdowns to continue there. So, I think they're both decent holds. Again, if you can sell Mostert at a little bit higher than kind of like the, low end RB2 range, then I would, but otherwise just kind of holding and, maybe Wilson gets hurt and he gets that elite rollback. You never know.
One of the things I wanted to bring up here, Jack, is the Colts mess. It looks like a tank, right? Like it really does. They just, Sam Ellinger clearly is not an NFL quarterback right now. They fire Frank Reich, who I think is really widely respected. They hire Jeff Saturday. They play caller. Excuse me. Their play caller is not a sneeze. Their play caller, though, is someone that I've never heard of before in my entire life, and is calling plays for the first time. I just think everybody knows this, and it's like we'd be selling really low on JT. We'd be selling really low on Michael Pittman, I think, but maybe it's okay to do so. Would you be panic selling? I mean, this is like, Bitcoin's down 40% in the last 24 hours. Should we just be totally dumping on our Colts stuff right now, Jack?
I don't think I'd be panic selling. JT was back at practice today. Deion Jackson got hurt last week, and David Chow said he might miss some time. And like you said, like it is just like the absolute low point for all Colts right now. And obviously it's pretty warranted with what's going on from a team level standpoint. But I don't really think I'd be looking to sell any of them like while they're at the absolute nut low right now. Pittman is still getting 20+% target share pretty much every game. Taylor looks like he's going to come back. And with Nyheim Hines gone and Deion Jackson hurt, maybe he gets a little more passing work. So, I mean, like, I don't want to, sound like optimistic on Colts players because I'm not. It's just like everyone is pessimistic, so I don't think I'd be looking to sell right now.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, they do have a good matchup against the Raiders this week, but then Eagles, Steelers, Cowboys, Vikings, Chargers, it's the schedule also isn't great for the Colts. I just don't have a lot of optimism here. I think if someone offered me like, God, I mean, they wouldn't even do it though. I was going to say, like, even taking like a little bit the worst of it on the JT stuff, just on name value, like if someone offered me, Aaron Jones for JT, like I'd rather have Aaron Jones. I just don't think anybody's gonna do that. We have Dameon Pierce ahead of JT right now. I don't know if anybody's giving up Dameon Pierce for JT. Imagine saying that before the season. Okay. Anything else you guys want to mention before we get into the one move to make here?
I wanted to bring up TJ Hockenson, just because how elite his role was in week 1 there with Minnesota. Played over 90% of the snaps, ran a routes on, 41 of 43 dropbacks, which is just, extremely elite for a tight end. And then also saw 9 targets. So I think that situation, we kind of called it a lateral move last week. I definitely think it's an upgrade at this point, just the way he was utilized week 1. I think, you and Evan have talked about it hurting Adam Thielen. I think it pretty much cuts out KJ Osborne too, from being fantasy relevant. Like, I don't think, he's relatively startable at this point. I think Hockenson will continue to take, a vast majority of the targets over the middle. So I just wanted to mention him. We moved him up to tight end 5. I think that's a pretty fair spot for him the rest of the year.
Yeah. I mean, usage is absolutely outrageous for a guy who was with the team for 3 days on TJ Hockenson. Completely ridiculous. I had a question in chat about the Ravens backfield here, Jack. I think it's an interesting one. Kendrake's played really well. We talked about this in the Showdown show yesterday. Kendrake has played very well. However, now they go into their bye. Gus Edwards is expected back after the bye. I kind of think that Drake has done enough to maintain a role here, and Gus Edwards is going to be like kind of a 2-down pounder that isn't in for every 2-down pound situation. So like Gus Edwards, I think, is getting thinner. Not that I really want Kenyon Drake either very much, but I think they can kind of cancel each other out a little bit is kind of my take here. We do have Gus Edwards ahead. And again, this is half PPR where Gus Edwards is certainly better than he is in full PPR. Jack, what do you think about Ravens backfield stuff going forward?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, Gus Edwards looked a lot better than at least I expected coming off the injury too. But he was not playing third downs even when he was healthy. And like you said, Drake has played pretty well, so Gus is not gonna take every like base down. So I kind of think I do think Gus is the guy once he's healthy that I would want the most, but I don't think any of them are particularly intriguing right now.
Yeah. One thing I'd say as we go into our bye, we think Mark Andrews is going to be back after the bye, but I've heard some like slightly concerning stuff. Oh, maybe Mark Andrews won't be ready after the bye. I'd be trying to hold Isaiah Likely through the bye if I could. I just wanted to put that out there. All right. We've said enough. We've said too much. We're going to get to the one move to make. Jack, I'll give you the honors if you're ready.
Yeah, I'm going to say to go out and buy Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Sun God, in 4 games with 80+% of snaps or more, which would be his 4 healthy games this year, 4 fully healthy games this year. He's gotten 32%, 35%, 27%, and another 35% target share game. He has at least 9 targets in every healthy game, including one where he only played like 70-something% of snaps. And then he had another game where he played 32% of snaps, got hurt, and in that game he still had 6 targets. Hockenson and his 17% target share are gone. Chark and Josh Reynolds are banged up. And then DeAndre Swift, who obviously, takes a bunch of targets when he's healthy, might not be healthy again this season. So I think Amon-Ra St. Brown, he is going to be near the top, if not at the very top of the league in target share down the stretch. And he's had a couple bad games in a row despite really encouraging volume. So I would be going out and trying to buy the Sun God right now.
Yes, Sun God volume remains very, very high. Detroit offense has not got it clicking yet, but still optimistic there, especially given the state of their defense. Mark, go ahead.
Nice. Love Jax, by the way. I'm going to tell you to buy someone else, and that is Pat Friarmouth. So the Steelers are coming off their bye. Chase Claypool was traded for the Bears. And Claypool's role for the Steelers this season was, as the big slot. He had taken 80% of his snaps in the slot for the Steelers. So we're expecting Steven Sims to kind of take over that role immediately. But Friarmouth was, the second highest among the starters in terms of slot rate. He had lined up there on 30% of his pass snaps this year for Friarmouth. So I expect, more targets over the middle of the field to go to Friarmouth, which is a pretty big statement because Friarmouth has seen 20+% target share already in 4 of the 6 full games. Adam, you've mentioned this, shout out Penn State, but Pat Friarmouth was put on this earth to score touchdowns and has only scored 1 this season. So I think, even with the Steelers offense not being that great, I think we should see some positive regression there for Friarmouth in the touchdown department. I think he's going to be a top 6 tight end the rest of the way. So I would go out and buy Pat Friarmouth.
Love it. Love it. Pat Friarmouth, shout out Penn State. And I mean, you can make a case he has the best rapport right now with the quarterback situation going on. And Kenny Pickett in Pittsburgh. I also I'm more optimistic on George Pickens, I think, than probably the market is. We see rookies so often in the second half of the year really get it going on. I know we've seen a lot of rookies get it going in their first half of this year, but second half is normally when it happens. And so a lot of these guys that started slow and maybe people have concerns about rookies, it's not out of the question that Pickens can come on the second half, especially with Claypool gone. All right. After this past week, I think a lot of people are going to say, you guys got to get out there and sell Josh Palmer. You got to sell Josh Palmer. Hey, listen, Keenan was out. Big Mike Williams was out. They were playing Atlanta. Of course, you got to sell Josh Palmer after this. I don't know about that, man, because Keenan has been battling his hamstring injury since literally August, aggravated multiple times. I don't know when Keenan's coming back. This is a really bad situation for Keenan. Big Mike's injury scares me big time for a player who plays the way he does and needs his feet and ankles the way that he does. And so I think Josh Palmer has a reasonable chance to be the number 1 wide receiver for Justin Herbert for the rest of the season. As this team continues to get decimated by injury on defense also, they're going to continue to get into some wild games, I think. And look, I mean, it just is what it is on Herbert. His ADOT is so low this year because they don't have any speed, but where Josh Palmer wins, I think, is closer to the line of scrimmage. And that's where Herbert's throwing it right now. I wouldn't be selling Justin Herbert. And if anybody's like, you got to sell high right now on Josh Palmer, I wouldn't be mind going out and getting him. All right. That is going to do it for another rest of season top 150 show. If you do have Draft Kit Pro or our NFL in-season package, you can access this top 150 at any time. We are running a rest of season sale, actually just a reduced price for the rest of season. And then, of course, weekly and monthly options are available. For Jack, for Mark, I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.